Oh, hey, anti-feminists are just like creationists. I can't tell the difference, can you? Anti-feminists are just like creationists. Well, it's a joke. Anti-feminist is just it's a joke. No need to get offended or outraged. I'm just joking. So, anti-feminists are just like creationists. What? Why are you having such an emotional reaction to a joke? What's wrong with you? Every time I've said it, it's just been a joke. And every time I say it in the future, it will also just be a joke. Anti-feminists are just like creationists. It's just a joke. That statement cannot be reasonably rebutted because it's just a joke. It works so gosh darn well as a joke, see? Anti-feminists are just like creationists. Do you get it? I'm just going to keep saying it because it's obviously a joke. It's obviously so fucking hilarious. If you're an anti-feminist, you're just like a creationist. It's a joke. Sorry. The sidetrack there. Oh yeah. This is Lucy. Lucy has borderline personality disorder. Ordinary humans have an instinctive ability to detect emotional states and diagnose intentions in other people. But in Lucy's brain, this instinct is dramatically overemphasized. Not only is she prone to heightened emotional states, but she pathologically projects those emotional states onto her model of other people. And as such, she lives perpetually in a psychological inversion of reality, in which other people are responsible for all the reactionary impulses she is feeling. This is why Lucy is obsessed with the nature and politics of identity. The typical self-medication for the borderline's disparity of emotional orientation is they come up with names for everything and demand everyone else's compliance with the regulations surrounding those names. As a result, Lucy is not just a very verbal person, but a very vocal person. She's not the best intellectual learner, but she's a very fast social learner. She can say what it takes to work her way in and out of most groups. However, as a result of her strict adherence to the authority of words, names, and identities, her sense of self becomes inevitably tied and double-knotted to her sense of othering. So she compulsively seeks out the company and attention of other people, but can only have highly unstable relationships with those people. She has an inconsolable fear of abandonment, and yet will mercilessly judge and abuse the people in her life who might abandon her. As is typical of cluster B conditions, Lucy also has overlaps with narcissistic and histrionic patterns of behavior. She's very concerned with emergent aesthetic trends and superficial ego massage. She considers her subjective feelings to be the cause of nothing, but the consequence of everything. Since she never blames herself for any negative consequences, she gets herself into increasingly dangerous situations, forever blaming them on anyone but herself. This is Billy. He has autism. He cannot speak! In extreme cases. Ordinary humans have an instinctive ability to detect emotional states and diagnose intentions in other people. But in Billy's brain, this instinct is minimal to absent. He's a very slow social learner, but a very good intellectual one. So if he studies the patterns in body language and facial movements and vocal intonation, typical of those around him, in much the same way he studies Lego bricks, he can in time develop a learned understanding of people's emotions and intentions, if not necessarily an instinctive one. He can even learn how sarcasm works and get very good at it. But if he doesn't get around to studying faces and bodies and voices, he'll just get very, very good with Lego bricks. Or whatever discipline happens to be available to him. And he can get extremely proficient at understanding the mechanics of a given system without ever giving names to its elements. It's much easier to understand the concept of a cube if you've never had to refer to things as planes, nodes, and vertices, and you simply know them as the abstract shorthand that you internally use for them. Without the need to communicate your ideas to other people, you're not burdened with the medium necessary to do that, and you can make calculations much faster. However, this rather predictably can often result in rather shy, introverted characters, where borderline sufferers tend to seek out relationships in high turnover. Autistics are more likely to have trouble developing relationships in the first place. More so in real life than online, evidently. Perhaps to coin a phrase, autistics can read anything except people. And whereas borderline sufferers often cope by seeing the world as a construct of names, of labels, of identities, of things agreed upon by others, autistics instead see the world as a series of nameless phenomena in no common language of agreement other than the measurable mechanisms that can be ascertained. This perhaps seems counterintuitive because autistics tend to excel obsessively in one particular subject or field or discipline. Sometimes it's Lego bricks, sometimes it's mathematics, and sometimes it's words. If you've ever met an autistic who's obsessed with words, you might get an impression contrary to what I've just outlined. But quite noticeably, autistics get obsessed with the structure of words and the history of words and the application of words, but borderlines get obsessed with the authority of words as ends rather than means. When autistics run away with words, they fall down a bottomless pit of endless fractal complexity. When borderlines run away with words, they run you straight into a brick wall. Shoot you against it. As we know, the verb to spurg means to fall down that rabbit hole. Perhaps we need an equivalent word for BPD. What I'm doing right now is spurging, but at least I'm not beeping. Needless to say, there are good eggs and bad eggs on both sides. I've painted rather a partisan picture here for the sake of rhetoric, but it's certainly not as simple as that. Some borderlines are in control enough to be exceptionally caring individuals, and some autistics simply become inconsiderate assholes like anyone else would. But I think I've made my point. The autistic spectrum is the neurological opposite of the cluster B spectrum, which is where borderline is. So it's very important that you don't get the two confused. In a similar way, schizophrenia is the opposite of Parkinson's. Schizophrenia is too much dopamine, Parkinson's is not enough. In extreme cases in both. Autism and cluster B aren't sort of accountable to any traceable neurotransmitter defect like that. Evidently it's a little more complicated than that, and that's where the analogy breaks down. But, as far as I can tell, calling feminists autistic is like calling Michael J. Fox a schizoid. Michael J. Fox is a schizoid! Now, that was a joke. And perhaps one or two people laughed at it, but the point is you laughed at it because it's not true. I just set it up as being not true. Had I told that joke without explaining what I just explained, you might have found it what we call funny because it's true. Michael J. Fox is a schizoid. I mean, look at him. It's certainly not my place to tell you that isn't funny, but it is anyone's place to inform you that it's not in fact true. Parkinson's is the opposite of schizophrenia. This joke would betray not just a false understanding of how the brain works, but a complete inversion of it. But feminists are autistic. I mean, look at them. They don't understand the world. Okay, for one thing, nobody does. And for another, if you're simply using the word autistic as a replacement for the word retarded, then I might ask you why the fuck you've done that, please. You could have done it with any mental condition, and you went with autism. You could have gone with borderline personality disorder, which is a pretty textbook description of your average feminist. And you may have noticed a disproportionate amount of autistic people in, Gamergate and men's rights and anti-feminism and whatnot. And there is, of course, a reason I called them Lucy and Billy. Because women are at least 3 times as likely to be diagnosed with BPD, and men are at least 5 times as likely to be diagnosed with autism. This appears to be the elephant that no one on either side of the room wants to talk about. This is a spectrum of spectra we're looking at, and it seems men on average are closer to one spectrum, and women on average are closer to the other. On average, hashtag not all, blah blah. I've been predicting for years now that at some point this would all devolve into a name-calling war, with us yelling, "You're all borderline," and them yelling, "You're all autistic." I've been dreading that moment, and I've been trying to avoid it. This is why I've never brought this up. As tempting as it's been to insinuate that feminism basically is the borderline personality disorder acceptance movement, or BP, damn. We're sorry. I figured that would be a rather dark and perhaps inappropriate angle for me to take. Frivolously diagnosing people with mental disorders is a really low blow. And if we called feminists borderline all the time, we wouldn't have an ethical leg to stand on if they started calling us autistic all the time. But oh boy, golly and gosh, I didn't expect this. I didn't expect feminists to be the ones to take the high road and at least feign sympathy for autism, while our side is calling everyone autistic like it's an insult. The fuck happened there, yo? That really looks like we lost. It seriously looks like we already took the insult to heart and we started using the enemy's weapons against each other, against everyone. We are replacing the word retarded with the word autistic as the go-to insult for general dumbasses. In the meantime, hardly anyone even knows what borderline personality disorder is. It has an acceptance movement, after all. An extremely fucking successful one. Try fraudulently scaring parents into believing that vaccinations cause BPD. See if that takes off as a movement. Did you know vaccines can cause Jew? Yeah. It'll give your child an incurable case of the Jews. Sounds daft, doesn't it? I don't like all the doomsaying business, but it's getting less and less difficult to imagine a future not too distant from here in which autistic people, or even allegedly autistic people, are being euthanized at the command of an army of institutionally normalized borderlines. Because it's like I'm already hearing gaggles of incarcerated Jews pointing at their prison guards and calling them hook-nosed kikes. And thinking it's funny. Yeah, you can tell a joke with a fundamentally broken premise and the audience will still laugh. Because the audience is already on board with the broken premise. It is possible for a joke to operate and land successfully on a large audience, all completely outside the boundaries of the truth. And when I try to pull you into the truth, it's going to seem like I'm trying to fuck up your joke. But I'm not. I'm pulling you into the truth, and that joke is not coming with you, because that joke does not belong outside upside-down land, from whence it took root. When you tell your fellow anti-SJWs that they're being just like SJWs, is that just a joke? No, it's usually just a very misplaced and misguided insult. So it would be a deep dick move to say that and then pretend it was a joke, wouldn't it? The right thing to do would be admit that it was a puerile insult hurled in the heat of the moment. You were not joking when you said it. You were not in command of the facts like you thought you were. Jokes are my thing, remember? Jokers don't like it when you bear false impersonation to a joker. Any more than rape victims like it when you bear false impersonation to a rape victim. In any case, your joke is shit. Boo. I hope it doesn't get many reviews more scathing than this, or more spurgy than this, but I trust it will. It's a very bad joke. It's probably the worst joke I've ever heard. It's the most broken premise I've ever heard, with the possible exception of feminism itself. To summarise and go out, autistic is not an insult, unless you take it as one. Same goes for that other thing you wish you technically weren't. Goodbye. Spurg right.